Let me tell you something I've learned after fixing power lines for 2 decades. Electricity always leaves a mark. You don't need to see the spark. You don't need to hear the pop. But something always gets scorched. That's how I started, feeling about my marriage. Now, I'm not one of those overly suspicious types. My name's Edgar, 38, and I've worked my whole damn adult life with my hands. I know when a wire is about to blow, and I know when a woman's lips don't taste like home anymore, but I didn't think I had to know both. Anyway, things were smooth, or so I thought. My wife, Chloe, PR for one of those pharma giants, you know, the kind that sells you side effects in bottles with pretty names, was always sharp, confident, dressed like she walked out of a damn TED Talk. 35, beautiful, sarcastic as hell. We'd been together 9 years. No kids, but we had a bull mastiff named Diesel who snored like a Harley and loved watching crime shows. Seriously, that dog's a freak. People always called us solid. We threw weekend barbecues, took road trips upstate, posted enough happy couple selfies to make even the algorithm blush. I thought we were good. Then came the toaster incident. Middle of a Tuesday, I'm elbow deep replacing a switchboard in some high-rise when I get a call. It's Mrs. Carver, our downstairs neighbor, 72, sharp eyes, sharper tongue. She says, "Edgar, I think your place is on fire. The alarm's been howling like it's auditioning for Broadway, and I saw smoke out the kitchen window." I froze. Grabbed my gear, flagged down a fire truck on its way there, and by the time I got home, it smelled like burnt crumbs and bad luck. The fire had been minor. Some genius left a towel over the toaster and left it on. Kitchen wall got scorched. Smoke damage, but nothing tragic. Still, it felt off. One of the fire guys, young, lean, chewing gum like it owed him money, said, "Something casual that stuck. Door wasn't locked. Someone left in a hurry right before we got here." I nodded, like it meant nothing. But I knew Chloe always locked the door. Always. Even if I was home. Then Mrs. Carver, who somehow always sees everything despite claiming her vision's gone to hell, leaned in and whispered, "I saw your wife leaving." She wasn't alone. Some man in a navy blue suit, looked sharp, wore one of those zip-up sweatshirts with a Delmont Biotech logo on the chest. That name didn't mean jack to me. I smiled politely, thanked her, and went back inside. Now, here's where it gets weird. Chloe didn't mention the fire until that night. Said she heard from the building manager. I played dumb, said, "Yeah, toaster mishap." She nodded, said, "Oh, right, sorry. I left it plugged in." Casual. Too casual. Then I asked about the man. "Oh, that was Julien," she said. "He works for one of our partners. We had a pitch to prep for. He swung by to grab some documents I forgot. Delmont Biotech." Julien. French name. Of course. Now I've worked with enough corporate types to know when someone's feeding me a half-truth, like chewing on a burger and finding out it's plant-based after the second bite. Later that night, I noticed our bed wasn't made. That in itself isn't scandalous. We're not robots. But Chloe always made her side, always fluffed her damn pillows like she was staging an open house. That night, her side was untouched. Mine had a few long strands of her hair on the pillow. Chloe's hair, on my side. And she never sleeps there. Strike 2. I walked into the bathroom. Some citrusy cologne scent hit me. Wasn't mine. I wear sandalwood No. 5, have since 2010. This stuff was sweet, European. Something you'd imagine. A guy named Julien would wear to brunch with your wife. I didn't say anything. Just sniffed, exhaled, flushed the idea like a busted toilet. But the real kicker came the next morning. I was feeding Diesel when sunlight hit the windowsill just right, and there they were. A pair of sunglasses, not mine, big, designer, black. Like the kind you see on GQ covers where no one actually smiles. They didn't belong to Chloe either. I would have noticed. I took a photo. Didn't move them. Just left them sitting there like a time bomb with no timer. That night, Chloe didn't mention them. Not the bed, not the cologne, not the shades. Nothing. So neither did I. Now, I ain't a detective. I fix what's broken and leave the rest to folks with badges and trust issues. But something felt off, and I started treating this like a job site. Check every wire, look for heat. What got me wasn't the fire. It was the smoke. I'm not saying. I became obsessed overnight, but something inside me shifted after that toaster incident. I started looking at our house like it wasn't our house anymore, more like a crime scene that hadn't been yellow taped yet. I wasn't crawling through vents or bugging light fixtures, but I had this itch in the base of my spine that wouldn't let me sit still. So I did what any man with a little curiosity and a little too much time at night would do. I started digging, one quiet layer at a time. The first person I called was Yvonne. Now, Yvonne was Chloe's closest friend back in the day, college roommate, coworker, loyal brunch companion, the whole champagne on a Sunday kind of friendship. They even went through a cleanse together one summer that made Chloe smell like cucumbers and rage for 3 weeks. Yvonne had left the company a while back after some messy reorganization, which I always suspected meant someone got thrown under the PR bus, and she didn't duck fast enough. I didn't beat around the bush. I called her on a Thursday afternoon while fixing a junction box in a client's basement that smelled like wet dog and expired peanut butter. I asked her, calmly, directly, if she knew anything about this Julien guy. You could practically hear the silence expand on the other end of the line. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that starts with guilt and ends with regret. There were rumors, she said carefully, dragging the word like it might snap mid-sentence. At the last company retreat, Lake Tahoe, I think, people saw them getting close. I mean, not office close, more like after dark wine by the fireplace close. I thanked her, hung up, sat in the truck for a while, watching a squirrel try to drag an entire bagel across someone's front lawn like it owed him rent. That squirrel had more determination than some men I've met. Anyway, now Julien wasn't just a name. He had edges. I looked him up that night. Delmont Biotech's official site had him listed as Director of Digital Innovation, which sounded like a made-up title someone gave themselves at Burning Man. His profile photo? Picture a French catalog model who sells meditation apps and drives a hybrid. Slicked back hair, arrogant little smirk, and the kind of teeth that probably came with their own whitening schedule. I clicked deeper. Found an event video from a tech health conference in Seattle. Chloe was sitting next to him during a panel. He leaned in close every time he whispered, like the microphone had social anxiety. They shared glances. The kind you don't share with a coworker, unless you've also shared a toothbrush at some point. I didn't throw anything, I didn't yell, I didn't even flinch. I just stared at the screen like it owed me money. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in a while. I took out the trash in the garage myself. Usually I let it pile up until Diesel started side-eyeing me like, "Really, bro?" But this time, I wanted to check something. Chloe often dumped office junk in there. Wrappers, receipts, used printer ink cartridges that looked like mini crime scenes, and that's where I found it. A small, folded wrapper tucked between a crumpled invoice and an empty bottle of imported sparkling water, something French, of course, with a name like "Eau de Someone's Trying Too Hard." The wrapper was unmistakable. A condom, unused but opened, shiny with residual guilt. Brand? Manic Skin, not ours. We used a different brand back in the day, and lately we hadn't used any at all. That's what happens after 9 years together and synchronized birth control calendars. So where'd it come from? I held it in my gloved hand like it was radioactive. I didn't throw it away. I didn't confront her. Instead, I did something that felt just the right amount of crazy. I put it in a plain white envelope, sealed it shut, and placed it on her nightstand like a bedtime story nobody wanted to read. On the envelope, I wrote in black Sharpie, "Souvenir from Delmont Biotech? P.S. I kept the receipt for trust. Might need to process a return. E." That night, she didn't say a word. The envelope stayed untouched. Dinner was normal. Diesel barked at a raccoon out back like it insulted his mother, and Chloe laughed. Like everything was fine, like she wasn't standing on a rug that I was slowly pulling from under her heels. But me? I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every harmless glance I might have ignored. Every sudden late meeting, every time she moved her phone screen away when I walked by, every joke about how French guys are charming that she used to toss out like confetti. This wasn't paranoia, this was math. And the numbers were adding up. I needed something solid, Something beyond wrappers and glances and suspicious cologne. I needed her version of the story. But before I got that, something else happened. It was Saturday morning. Chloe was out at yoga, and I was organizing my tools in the garage, pretending the world wasn't wobbling on its axis. I heard her car pull in. She came in quietly. No yoga mat, no energy, just silence. I didn't look up when she passed by the garage window, but I noticed the envelope was gone. Something told me a fuse had finally blown, one of those slow, silent ones that sizzle before the smoke even starts. There's a moment, right before a storm hits, when the sky doesn't move. No wind, no birds, just this weird, suspended stillness, like nature's holding its breath. That's what it felt like the evening Chloe finally cracked open her version of the truth. I was in the garage, tightening bolts on my workbench drawers that didn't actually need tightening, just trying to keep my hands busy so my head wouldn't start asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. Diesel was snoozing by the door, snoring into a pile of half-chewed tennis balls like he didn't care. That the world upstairs might be collapsing. Then I heard it, the soft knock. Not the casual kind, not the "hey, you in there" kind. It was gentle, intentional. Like she wasn't just asking permission to come in, but asking if there was still space in the room, for her, for this conversation, for whatever pieces we had left. I didn't say anything. Just slid the wrench across the table and looked up. She stepped in holding a manila folder thick enough to mean trouble and light enough to mean she already knew what was in it. Her eyes were swollen, not from crying. Chloe never cried easily, but from not sleeping. Same as me. Her mouth didn't move at first. She just placed the folder on the workbench like it was a court summons and said, "You probably think you know what happened. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you." I didn't say a word. I let the silence stretch like a cable under tension because I knew she had something rehearsed and I wasn't about to let her off script. "I screwed up," she said finally. "Sitting on the old bar stool I used to fix fishing rods, I never actually take fishing. It wasn't an affair, but it wasn't nothing either." And then she told me everything. Calm, measured. Like she'd replayed it 100 times in her head, and this was take 101. It started, she said, at a business trip in Lausanne, Switzerland, ski lodge conference type of deal. She and Julien ended up in the hotel bar one night. Too many glasses of something French and bubbly. Laughter echoing off candlelight and mutual professional frustration. He leaned in, said something clever in that smooth accent that probably gets him past more doors than key cards, and boom, a kiss. Just one. No hotel room, no receipts. Just lips and guilt and panic and the kind of silence that feels louder than fireworks. She swore that's all it was. But here's where the road turns. Julien didn't stop there. A few weeks later, he started sending her texts. Nothing wild at first. Just, "I miss that night," or "When can I see you again?" Chloe ignored them. Then came the photo. Taken that night. A selfie she didn't know he snapped, showing them close. Too close to explain, and with it, a message. "Your husband might be good with wires, but I've got connections too." I felt my jaw clench. Not from jealousy, from fury, because I knew that kind of man. The ones who mistake silence for surrender, who push boundaries like buttons and smile when you flinch. That folder on my table? It held the receipts. She had recorded one of his phone calls. Audio clear as a weather report. Him threatening to make things uncomfortable unless she played along. There were emails, too. Creepy, manipulative. She'd forwarded them all to legal and filed a report. HR didn't just fire him. They blacklisted him. Corporate ethics panel got involved. It became a full internal review. The kind they bury with NDAs and bonus packages. And that condom wrapper? Chloe said he must have left it. Planted it. Maybe during a meeting when she stepped away to take a call. Or maybe he was trying to make her look guilty just in case she decided to tell someone. Like planting a bloody glove on your own doorstep. "I should have told you earlier," she said, voice low. "But I was embarrassed and scared. Not of you, just of what it would look like, and how much trust I'd already burned by not stopping him sooner." She opened the folder, pulled out the final sheet. It was a legal notice confirming Julien's termination and the settlement she'd filed for harassment. She won. Morally, legally, but still lost sleep and peace and probably a little of herself in the process. I stood there, arms crossed, staring not at the papers, but at her hands. She was clutching the folder like it could protect her from the truth it carried. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I bought you a new pillow." That sentence should have been nonsense. But it wasn't. She walked over to the back seat of her car and returned holding a small brown box. Inside was a fresh version of my old pillow, the one she always called the ugliest marshmallow in America. Same shape, same texture, even the slight coffee stain I'd accidentally recreated with a Sharpie one night trying to fix a tear. She placed it on the bench and said, "If you still want to sleep next to me, I'll be there. But if you don't, if this has crossed too many wires, just leave the pillow in the box. I'll understand." She walked back inside. I stood there for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 2 hours. I don't know. Time moves weird when your marriage is on the table, next to socket wrenches and oil rags. I didn't think about what she said. I thought about what she didn't say. About how she never tried to spin it into a sob story. Never blamed stress or alcohol or the weather. She owned it. Every messy part of it. The next morning when Chloe came downstairs, Diesel was on the couch, tail thumping like a drum solo, and the pillow was already on my side of the bed. No speeches, no fireworks, no Instagram captions. Just the sound of coffee brewing and a woman I still knew better than anyone sitting across from me like, she never left. Sometimes the spark doesn't kill you. It just wakes you up.